Hello, and welcome back to the Tao of Humaning. I'm Dr. Christine, your guide and host for these conversations around how it is that we human together and how can we be even more aware, energized, connected, fabulous along the way. I'm so glad you're here. In our last episode, we started talking about the compatibility of science and soul, and how we are more complex than simply our physiology. And today we're going to continue that conversation about how we human in a way that is anchored in the body. So, I wanted to talk today a little bit about this concept of body literacy and this idea that our bodies are consistently communicating with us. I know. The tricky part is that a lot of us, if you're anything like me growing up, I was never taught any kind of map or system to really understand what it was that my body was trying to communicate, right? I teach research classes, and in those classes, we talk about research literacy and how that's useful as a communication tool for other medical providers, having conversations in a language that they can understand, and also with patients to be able to explain, an unusual or different system like Chinese medicine in a language that they can understand. Research can be a nice tool to do that. And there's also in clinic, I talk a lot with patients around this idea that our body is communicating all of the time, and it's not a random communication. A lot of times it feels random. This is one of the things that I really loved about getting into more and more understanding of the Chinese medicine lens. Certainly not the only lens that looks at the body this way, but we really look at the body as a system, and we're really looking for patterns. And so in this episode and the next episode, I'm going to introduce some different ideas around, what I think about when I'm talking with patients. And next week, we're going to be talking specifically about the five element system as a map for understanding ourselves and our physiology so that we can then take all of that data and create a plan that is most useful, right? I often talk with patients about, avoiding this feeling of just throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? Because we start to look at each and every symptom that we have sometimes as humans as individual. And so we think of, oh, okay, I can't sleep. So, okay, I'm going to take these supplements to help me sleep. And my digestion's been kind of funny the last couple of months. So I'm going to do a parasite cleanse, and then I'm going to do oregano oil, and then I'm going to do this other stuff, right? And they're we're treating them as two separate things. In Chinese medicine, through this lens or this map, you could think of it as this language, we're looking for patterns. And I'll get to share a little bit about how I think about that. But if you're wanting more in depth support, obviously come see me if you're in close to Costa Mesa, California. And if you're not, find yourself a fantastic acupuncturist near you, because it is pretty remarkable to see the way that our just the way that we can think about patterns, and we can take, like, a lot of times I'll have patients come in and they'll talk about all of these different random just things that they're experiencing with energy, sleep, menstrual cycle, digestion, you name it, right? We're talking about all of the different systems when someone comes into the clinic, and they're often really frustrated because they feel like, oh my gosh, I have these 10 different things. Like, I'm tired, my energy is really low, my digestion, my stools are soft, right? I can't focus. I've got this brain fog, right? And then I have trouble falling asleep, all of these, right? Different things. And then I'm sitting there taking all of this in and translating this language in my mind that I'm receiving into patterns. And so a lot of times I'm able to offer a sense of relief because I'll then share, oh, I know this feels like a lot of different things for you. This happens to fit into a couple of patterns within Chinese medicine. Here's how, obviously here's how we would address them using this system. And I would suspect that as we work on your digestion, you're going to find that your sleep is improving. You're going to find that your brain fog is lessening. And all of these things start to click into a better, a better coherence, I guess is the word that I'm thinking of. Everything starts working well again together, right? So then you don't need necessarily to have one single supplement that's addressing all these different things. I love this about Chinese medicine. I think it is beautifully efficient and oftentimes very relaxing for people to start to understand this language that their body has been speaking, right? But it's like walking into a room when you don't speak the language and then getting frustrated because you're not able to communicate the things that you want to be communicating, right? And then all of a sudden you start to be able to speak the language and you're like, "Oh my gosh, okay, welcome. We can have this conversation now," right? So this is really what it's about. And so the idea is as our bodies are communicating, they're going to start with a whisper, right? So it starts with the energy being a little bit lower, right? It starts with feeling a little bit of like frustration, right? Just a little more irritated than I normally would be, right? Or, oh, I feel like a little bit of tension in my shoulders, right? Those whispers are our body's way of saying, like, hey, pay a little attention here, right? And if we keep pushing through, which a lot of times, especially in this culture, in this day and age, we're, in more of a hustle, keep going, being busy, all of the things kind of a place, it's harder to notice, to stop and notice. That's a skill that's learnable. And yeah, it develops over time. So if that fatigue or irritability or tension are not given attention, then those messages and that communication is going to get louder, right? So eventually it's going to arc into more burnout kind of symptoms, right? Or um that little frustration is going to turn into like an explosion of anger, right? Probably at a loved one that we didn't mean to explode at. Or that tension is going to turn into actual pain, right? Or limitation in our range of movement, range of motion, range of movement. Anyway, you get the point. Starts as a whisper. When we can listen to things as a whisper, start to implement strategies that simple as possible is what I tend to prefer. And then we can give the body the attention it needs, and then that communication becomes actual quiet, right? Until something else comes up. With women's bodies, especially, we are gifted for a lot of years a menstrual cycle. And in Chinese medicine, that gives us an incredible amount of information about the overall health of that woman, not just her reproductive health, but her entire physiology. And so for women, I especially will do some conversations about women's cycles in particular. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole today. Today, I want to introduce this idea. Our body is talking to us, right? And learning to understand what it's saying is a useful skill that can be learned. So far, so good. And I think I would add remembering that it's not always going to be something physical. So sometimes there's emotional patterns that will show up as our body's way of communicating with us. Sometimes it's more of an energetic way that our body will speak to us. And it could be just your energy ebb and flow throughout the day or in different situations in your life. Like, oh, every time I go to work, I feel really tired, right? Maybe there's something there that's trying to communicate with you of something that could be tweaked to not feel tired at work, for example. Um, and then there can also be more of a spiritual side of the way that our body can communicate with us. For example, if we're feeling a period in our lives where we feel kind of dull, like a dull affect, like we're not feeling as much joy that we naturally would feel with certain activities or interests or people, feeling that kind of uninspired or disconnected kind of feeling. Sometimes that can be our more spirit side of us whispering, like, hey, something's out of alignment. You're like, where can you be more connected? Where can you have some check in? Where can you pull back from things? Right? All those kinds of questions start to come more easily when we slow down and we learn these skills to start to hear the language that our body is communicating with us. And then as that progresses, like for I've been doing this now 30 years with this system in Chinese medicine, it's almost second nature to the point where I forget sometimes that this isn't second nature for everyone. So this is also part of having this space where I can share here some of these things that I have found so incredibly useful for ultimately leading a life that feels very filled with joy and not a overjoy like I'm excited about things that are happening in my life because that of course yes those things happen, but this kind of a joy that is not able to be taken away by circumstances. Does that make sense? It's like a I feel like true joy really is an inside job, right? And that comes with more ease. I think that is our natural state. I also think it comes with more ease when we're able to listen to these little signals that our body is saying, sharing, and then to take steps and pivot. And then it becomes this kind of dance that we're doing in our lives, right? To be able to be ultimately more in flow, I guess is the term that you would use. Um, but feeling more vibrant, more alive, more connected allows us to really show up for the people in our lives that we really love. It allows us to show up for our work in a way that we really love. So there's just ultimately numerous benefits to doing all of this. Um, and, Chinese medicine, I do feel like is really fantastic at observing all of these different things over time and how our bodies interact with nature. Also, it's a very nature based medicine. So, next week, we're going to be talking about the five elements, and I'll be sharing that as a beginning of a map for you to start exploring and seeing, oh, okay, I have a tendency to go out of balance in this element more than this one. And I wonder what could be possible by understanding that a little bit more. It's one of my favorite tools and definitely something that I, again, like almost second nature do at this point. Um, and probably one of the most useful lenses that I've seen. Chinese medicine is really masterful at this kind of observation, taking in the data, and then making informed decisions based on that support us, right? And I think that's important too as we go along these different conversations that we're having here. Anytime that we're looking at our health or our well-being, remembering that we are collecting data, right? There's no judgment. There's no like, oh my God, this terrible thing is happening. Sometimes there are terrible things that happen. I don't mean to discredit that. But I do think there's a tendency for us to um, I don't know, over awfulize sometimes the symptoms that are showing up for us when really, I think when you can learn to relate with that information in more of a like, huh, okay, I wonder, my digestion's been a little bit different. I wonder what's going on there. Wonder what might be needed. And then using that as a way to engage with your body and your life. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense, please comment below and I will talk some more about these things because it is really, it's been a really enriching part of my life. Um, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So I'm glad that you're here. Your body wants to be understood, your body is listening, and you are able to learn and listen in a way that is useful and maybe even relaxing and could be even a little bit fun. I wonder. So, if you want a reflection for this week, something that you might consider thinking about is having a moment of pause. And that pause could be in a car line, it could be in the shower, something that you're already doing every day. But take a pause and ask, I wonder what messages my body is communicating with me. And I wonder how much more clearly I could listen. Let me know how it goes in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you for our next episode. Bye for now.